Man, I've been sitting here in this chair listening to Andrew Jackson Jihad for the last 3 hours, um, and it's put me in a bit of a mood because I've been thinking about the content of the lyrics. If you don't know who Andrew Jackson Jihad is, it's a folk punk band with a very abrasive edge. A lot of the songs deal directly with depression, the hopelessness of existence, suicide, all that good stuff. Um, One of the lyrics in off one of the songs on Cant Mountain is literally at the end of the song he goes, "And I'll live, unfortunately." And so, it's pretty edgy stuff. But I've been listening through all of their discography because I've never been like a huge fan of Andrew Jackson Jihad. There's always been a few select songs that I really liked, but I've never been able to get into their albums until very recently. I decided, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to listen to this and I'm going to put myself into the mindset of the person who would listen to this because I already liked, the lyrics and the sound of a lot of the songs. I just had to apply that same mindset to their other music. I'm not really an album guy, but to, have something that's very punchy and, has a lot of pop-esque songs, it's a bit easier to get into. My draw with their music was always the voice. Like, I think the voice can be really good for certain songs. For, on Big Bird, for example, like the song wouldn't be nearly as emotional without, the voice of the main singer sounding as it does. And same with like, a more comedically slanted song like the one he did about cigarettes. I don't remember which one it was called. It was on like their first album. Um, you know, if he didn't sound the way he did, the song wouldn't be nearly as funny. And so I've been sitting here listening to their albums, um, and there was just a thought lingering in the back of my mind, as it tends to when I get into these more like depressive forms of music. And it is, why is it that I'm listening to this? Right now, sitting in my room at what is it, 3 a.m., something like that, listening to hours and hours of this folk musician who, most of the normal people in the world don't even really know about. Why am I doing that? Instead of, being outside talking about Taylor Swift and how, the newest idol on Donald Trump, the Art of the Deal TV show did something. Like, I don't know what these people like, but I'm not doing something like that. I'm sitting there listening to this very obscure music at 3 a.m. when I had woken up at 6 p.m. And if you go back for like the last couple weeks, most of what I've been doing is just waking up at 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. and watching YouTube videos, reading and listening to music all day. That's been the extent of my existence for quite a while now, probably since the beginning of the year. And so I I try to figure out why is it that I'm like that. If you look through all of my channel, it's kind of documenting um, the entire course of those events. But I there's one specific moment that I always go back to when I talk about this. Is when I was little. I was talking to my dad about the divorce between my mom and my dad. And I was like 7, 8 years old at the time, and I was told that the divorce, as it was happening, was my fault. That it wasn't because of anything between the two of them. It was because I had been acting out as a result of me and my brother not getting along with one another. And that was the reason why they were getting divorced. Now I never did anything horribly bad as a kid. I wasn't, in comparison to most kids in the United States, I was just a little bit angry. I wasn't as bad as a lot of kids are. And so, to be told that, that I was the reason why the divorce was happening. It was something that I never stopped thinking about. My entire life, I never stopped thinking about that. Um, and as I was talking about in the video I did on autism like 2 or 3 days ago, right? I talked about how, um, I was always told that I was a genius as a kid. I was simultaneously told that I was boring, as early as like 4 years old. I was told, Logan, you're boring, shut up, we don't want to hear you. And, I would sometimes be physically hit for talking too much. Um, and so I, I think about these instances and I just, it's, they're things that I've never stopped thinking about. I never stopped thinking about, in order to get my parents' love, I need to perform a certain way. I need to become a certain kind of person, be entertaining. And because I was told that I was boring from such a young age, that I was the reason for their divorce from such a young age, it always stuck in my mind. And it wasn't even just those two instances. Like, those were the relatively heavy ones. Like, almost every day that I would interact with, like, my dad, for example. And I know where this comes from. It's because his dad did it to him. Is that, if I made even the smallest mistake, like, I would get anxious and I would say my words too slow, or, I would, I wouldn't be doing something correctly, and, he would get frustrated and go, why the fuck are you doing it this way? And, you know, as a teenager, now, I can understand why. It's because he just got fed up with it. He didn't really think about the implications of what he was saying. But as a little kid, every single time I would make even the smallest mistake, getting yelled at for it and being told that I was stupid and that I was just doing things wrong, it was something that I kept thinking about. Oh, it wasn't just something that like I put in the back of my mind when the only people you have, because I was homeschooled until I was 12 and a half, when the only people you have around you tell you these things like, you're boring, you're the reason for our divorce, you're not doing this right, I'm gonna yell at you for it. When that's happening all the time, it puts you in the mindset of needing to achieve something, to build something, to perfect something. And so whenever I would make the smallest mistake, that same dialogue that I was told, I would now hear. So that's one of the biggest problems I had on my YouTube channel when I first started up, is that I would take down videos because I would just be so ashamed of them. If anyone mentioned a video that I made, said anything negative or positive about it, I felt extreme anxiety, heart-pounding anxiety. And, thinking back, when I started writing the analysis blog posts on Tumblr in 2016 or so, mid 2016, and I started doing the vlogs all the time. It was very weird for me because everything I did was being analyzed as I was doing it. And so I would stumble over my words even more because I was commentating over the last words that I had spoken. And so in my head, it was like this constant dialogue of, you did that wrong, you did this wrong. And I didn't just naturally get the words out. I needed to build them in a robotic, structured manner, or else I just didn't feel like the words were right. When really what I should have been doing was speaking from the heart. I know that now, but at the time, if I made even the smallest mistake, I would just slap myself across the face. Hard. I would keep hitting myself across the face, and I would do retake after retake after retake, again and again and again, until I got the video right. Because that's how obsessed I was with not making an error. And by the time I uploaded it, I was still ashamed of the video. I thought it was terrible. I used to call myself one of the worst YouTubers on the platform. That was something I sincerely believed. And it wasn't just relegated to YouTube. Like, every aspect of my life, I thought about it in this way. That if I make even the smallest mistake, I deserve nothing but punishment. My brain, like I said, It was a constant dialogue of you're doing wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. And I it took me a very long time to break out of that rigorous self-criticism. Like, when I was in 7th grade, that was probably at the point of my lowest self-esteem, some of the lowest self-esteem that I had. I hated myself. I hated my existence because I saw nothing but mistakes in each social interaction I would partake in. And so the way I reacted that was by getting into fights. I would get into lots and lots of fights with people because I felt my honor or my image was somehow being damaged and I needed to take up arms and, you know, throw a tantrum over it. Um, and I started bullying random kids who just didn't deserve it at all. It's kind of it's kind of pathetic to imagine my scrawny ass just running around and being mean to people, but there were some kids there who were even more socially inept than me, and so I would run behind and I would take like a bag. I would put a bunch of air in it and I would smash it behind someone's head, or I would just like tell someone like go away, like yell at them and then just tell them that they're a shitty person and that no one cares about them. Like I would say fucking terrible things just to put other people down. But the way the place where it was coming from was internally. It was coming from me seeing myself in that position. And so the only way I knew how to deal with the severe self-esteem issues that I was feeling at the time were to retaliate and act as if I was hot shit, like I was the greatest person ever. Um, and it was wrong. It was just plain wrong. Like each time I think about that, I get legitimately sad. I I get legitimately sad thinking about some of the things that I've said and done to people just because I was upset or because I wanted to look good and feel good about myself. The moments when I was most arrogant and cruel to other people were the moments in which I felt the worst about myself. I thought I was this terrible guy who was going to do everything wrong, and so I acted out the image of being a terrible guy. The only difference was is that I tried to market it in a way of being cool, but I knew it was bad. Like I knew it was bad as I was doing it. I felt bad while doing it. That's the conflict there. It's the simultaneous desire to be recognized as some sort of grand individual that's big and can, fight people. And then at the same time realizing that your actions are bad and feeling bad for them, wanting to go give the person a hug that you just fucked with immediately after doing it. That emotional conflict was present every single day that I went to school. And because of the perfectionist element of my personality, I just took those pent up emotions that I had towards myself onto everyone else. And this was ultimately why in 8th grade I abstained from school entirely. I said I don't want to go. And so I was registered as a homeschooler at this time. And I just sat in my room all day and I watched YouTube videos and I read stuff online about social interaction and psychology, and I was getting more into this analytical way of thinking. I have a lot of videos telling that story. But before that point, that was at my like least self-aware point about what I was doing. I knew what I was doing was bad and I felt bad for it, but I was unself-aware about where it was coming from. I didn't know why I was doing it. And that made me feel worse. The fact that I didn't know why any of this stuff was happening made me feel even worse because I didn't feel like anything was wrong at home. I didn't think that, I was given a bad example or I was given a bad place. I just thought that, I lived in a world where I was the problem. That was always my immediate assumption, is that I may be verbally blaming others, but internally I'm blaming myself. That's that's the big contradiction in actions like this. Um, and in no way is that a justification for any of the ways that I've acted in the past. That's just me explaining where it comes from. And I try my best not to do things like that anymore. I don't like putting other people down just to lift myself up, but sometimes it feels like a part of me, and I'm nowhere near as bad as I used to be. Like, most of that sin has been cleansed from my body at this point, but there are little moments where it slips in when I'm very, very upset, and I always feel enormously guilty afterwards. But I know I have this platform that I can talk about these things to, and it gives me a little bit of comfort. Like, people, they have therapists that they go to to tell these things. I just talk to a camera in my room, and then I always feel better afterwards. But I don't know. It's just, it's so strange to me to think about that upbringing. Not just because the circumstances of where I grew up were very, very complicated. I grew up in a more specific situation than most people that I've met. Most people, they're, from the suburbs, or they're from the hood, or, they're from a very small apartment in a big city, typical stuff. Or if they're from the South, they have very conservative parents. My parents weren't conservative. You know, they they their parents usually worked jobs. My parents didn't work jobs. So they have these normal consistencies that you see throughout people's lives. But I've never felt like I've had that. I've always looked at my own situation, um, and I've never been able to see very much of my life in the life of other people. Certain elements of my personality and the way that I think, sure, but I'm lucky enough to find people who share the same interests that I do, yet, words, let alone, um, let alone people who can identify with my experiences and experience similar things. I don't know. It's late hours like this. It's late hours like this that I start contemplating how far it is that I have made it from there. Because even though I still am experiencing a lot of the effects of this rampant perfectionism and needing to be something big in order to receive the love and understanding of others, um, I felt myself drift away from that more and more as time has gone on, which is good. You know, I I think the goal should always be not to put myself in the spotlight. Like, that's the ironic thing, is that I've been a shut-in for however long, but the motivation behind so many of my actions when I was in the real world were to deliberately get attention from other people. The person who isolates themselves the most is also the person who wants attention and to be around others the most. It's a very cruel contradiction to be living out, I think. Um, I don't know. I don't know, man. I I don't really know what I was trying to say with this video. Um, I just wanted to get some of my thoughts out. I had some things that I was continued thinking about when I was listening to those records, and I don't know. Perfectionism and the need to be understood. Two of the worst things that a human being could ascribe to. But hey, that's how it is on this bitch of an earth. Okay. You've listened to me too much.